everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to make an Italian fennel soup with little meatballs in it. And then we're going to bake up some banana muffins, some with some walnuts in it, and then just some plain. And yeah, so it's just kind of a simple and easy thing. Let's get started on our muffins. That way they'll have a time to bake. These are a sourdough discard recipe, so they do use a half a cup of our discard in there. So let's get that in here. So we're going to use some of Gus Gus. Give him a little bit of a stir. Yesterday I prepped up some new sourdough loaves, so we'll have some to bake up tonight. And we need a half a cup. And it can be active starter or your discard. It doesn't really matter so much for this recipe because we aren't using it for the leavening process, more of just to add that great, health benefits versus and a little bit of that nice flavor to it. So let's add that in. So we've got a half a cup of our sourdough discard in here. I'm going to put it right over here. Keep Jacques nice and safe. And then we've got 3 very, very ripe bananas. This is what I consider a perfectly ripe bananas. These need a little, they're almost there, but I've got several bananas because you know how it is with kids. One week they love bananas, next week they don't touch them. And I'm just like, get consistent. Eat your bananas consistently. I did not order 6 bunches of bananas like I did that one time. But we're going to mash these into our discard here for it. But the browner / blacker the banana, the better it is for banana bread, banana muffins, whatnot. I think we're going to make some banana donuts tomorrow with the rest of them.
Judy sent you.
Well, thank you, Judy. We appreciate that. So we've got our first 2 in here. I like to give it a little smush first in our banana peel. Apparently, I like to drop it all in there as well. Okay. So we've got our bananas in there. I'm just give these a quick toss. And then we're going to use a fork to mash these up because you want this to make a nice, almost not completely smooth, but just a nice, almost puree texture to it. And that's why you want very, very ripe bananas. You don't want them, like where they're still good to, just peel and eat, because otherwise they'll have big chunks in it and they won't be sweet enough to get a really great flavor out of them. So we've got that discard mixing in there. Just helps them mash up a little bit nicer. There. And then we're going to add in our brown sugar next. This recipe uses a whole cup of brown sugar, and that brown sugar is just going to give such a great flavor to these banana muffins, which I absolutely love. But I want to make sure I've got all of these really big pieces of banana mashed up. Now, this is something you could use a hand mixer with, but we are using butter in our batter, and towards the end, I don't like to over mix it because then it leads to a denser muffin. So I try to just use like my hands and a fork whenever possible so that I don't over mix and have a more nice and fluffy muffin. We're going to use a whole cup of brown sugar, light brown, but you can definitely use dark brown if you prefer. Make sure it's firmly packed. So this is a half a cup. And we'll do another half a cup more. And there we go. Put this guy to the side. And we'll give this a mix in there into our bananas and our discard and let it kind of start to dissolve. And then I'm going to switch out for a spatula here now that I have most of my banana chunks fairly mashed up here. Okay, give it a good mix around. And anytime I see a big one, I might just smush it into the side of my bowl. because again, I don't want big chunks of banana in my muffin. I'd rather it just be a smoother base for it. Okay. And now we're going to add in 1/4 cup of melted butter. You're going to want to make sure it cools a little bit because you don't want it to be scalding hot in there. But the nice thing about this recipe is because you're adding in that banana, you don't need to use as much butter as you would in a lot of muffin recipes. And then we're going to mix that in, and then we'll add in our eggs. So get this mixed in nicely. Kind of incorporate that butter into our banana, sugar, and our sourdough discard. And then we're going to add in 2 eggs. One and 2. I'm going to pop the yolks and then I'll mix them in. That way they don't swim away from me. And then we're just going to mix these in until they're completely incorporated into our batter. And then we're going to add in our salt, baking soda, spices, and vanilla. And then our last ingredient will be our flour. And then, of course, we'll do part of them plain, and then we'll add in our walnuts. Okay, got this egg fairly mixed in here. And you can do as much mixing as you kind of please now, but once we get to the very end with that flour, again, you don't want to overmix. Okay, get my salt down here. We're going to add in 1/2 teaspoon of salt, a whole teaspoon of baking soda, and then we're going to do our spices here. A whole tablespoon of cinnamon. We're kind of doing like a nice kind of pumpkin spice, winter spice to these, which is one of my favorite with bananas bread. So a spiced banana bread. So a whole tablespoon. And then we are going to add in 1/2 teaspoon of allspice. A 1/2 teaspoon of cloves, which I always feel like is like the Christmas spice because it just smells like Christmas, tastes like Christmas. And then 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, which I love. But if you don't, I feel like nutmeg is one of those polarizing spices. You either love it or you don't. You can always omit it if you don't like it. Just 1/4. It's a strong spice, so don't over add it. And then we're going to add in our vanilla. We're going to use 1 teaspoon of vanilla. And then we'll give this a nice mix in. We'll mix all of our spices and the vanilla, our baking soda, and our salt around until it's completely incorporated in here. And then it'll be time to add in our flour. And then while we're mixing this, our oven is preheated to 350 degrees because we'll be baking these at 350 for 20 minutes. Here we go. And just make sure, we want to make sure that baking soda gets completely dispersed throughout all of our wet ingredients. It just kind of takes away the process of sifting the baking soda through the flour, which I'm just not a fan of. I don't like that stuff in recipes. So I always like to add it to my wet ingredients and make sure it gets thoroughly mixed in. Here. Okay. And now we're going to add in a cup of flour. So we're going to use all-purpose flour here. And then just make sure you have no pockets in it. And then we will mix it in until it's just combined. You don't want to overmix because overmixing will lead you to a denser muffin. And we want it to be a nice and fluffy muffin. But the nice thing about these muffins is that banana replaces a lot of the flour that you would use. Normally, I use about 2 cups in a standard muffin base, but with the banana, you can cut it down to half a cup, or cut it down to half. And then we're going to mix this until it's just barely combined. And then what we'll do is I'll spoon in about half of my muffins with the base, and then we'll add some nuts to the other one. There we go. Once you've kind of mixed all of that powdery whiteness away, then you'll know that they're mixed. You're going to have a thicker, lumpier batter, just like that. So don't mix until it's smooth. You don't want it to be smooth. We've got my muffin things. We've got muffin liners today. Not the same thing. I'll pop them in. Now I'm going to bake my nut one, or my nut-free ones, in the middle, and then my nut ones on the outside. Just because the nut ones on the outside, the nuts need a little bit more time, and so baking them on the outside gives them a little bit more direct heat, and that's going to allow it to bake a little bit more evenly. So I'm going to try to scoop these up and use half my batter for that. And then we'll go and we'll add our nuts in. You could also add in, sometimes I'll add in cranberries or blueberries or chocolate chips, raisins, so many different mix-ins you can add to your banana muffins to just make them fabulous. Now, I feel like, the standard, you go in and you have, the walnuts, because that's a classic and everyone loves walnuts. But I feel like you can do so many different, ones. Fruit is a good go-to.
Could you do a streusel?
You can definitely do a streusel on it. I've actually done streusel several times with them. It's just lovely.
Where can they find this recipe?
So we will be posting our lives when we're done with our stream. We always post our lives to the link on our page, so you can definitely rewatch that and bake along with me again. I'm not sure if I have this exact one on a recipe card for our members yet, but I have very similar versions of this for our members on there for recipe cards. But I'll have a variation of my banana, either muffin or a loaf, in our cookbook that we're coming out with. So, because this is one of my favorite, kind of banana muffins. It's a spiced banana muffin. Okay, now we've got about half of them in here, and you see I have them filled up nice into the top because we like our big bakery dome on it. Now for our remaining half, because again, we're using just half the batter, we're going to add in some chopped walnuts here. Because it's half the batter, we only need about a half a cup versus if we're going to do the full batter, we'd use about a cup. So I'm going to use about 2 handfuls, should give me about a half a cup here. Don't over nutify. Don't put too much nuts in it because then it will make it a little bit more challenging to bake. You won't get quite the right consistency if you have too many nuts. Okay, we've got those mixed in. And now I'm going to scoop them in. And I just go spoonful by spoonful, and then we kind of even them out at the very end. Fill that guy up. But I will say pecans are also a great, if you don't have walnuts, pecans work well. I will say walnuts and pecans, they may look similar, but they have very different flavors. I feel like walnuts have a more earthy taste to them, while pecans can go with a more sweeter taste. Here. And get through a little scoop, making sure I get all the nuts in there. When I was a kid, I used to go to this little daycare school after school, and the daycare teacher, Mrs. Robinson, would we'd go to thing, and she would like, oh, go out and collect all these walnuts for us. And she's like, and I'll give you guys a candy bar. So we thought this was the greatest thing ever. So we would go and we'd collect hundreds and hundreds of walnuts for her. And then we would spend hours cracking them open. We thought this was the greatest thing ever. And now I realize how bamboozled we were as a kid. What we did for a candy bar back then. But I mean, she probably got like 10 pounds worth of walnuts back in the day from us that we searched and we cracked and got for her on there. And I was like, I still remember that. Now every time I see like walnuts out and about, and I'm like, kids, go get those walnuts. I was like, we could harvest our own walnuts. See that tree? But it's always sit there because, you know, when a walnut falls, it falls into a big green thing. And so then you have to wait to collect them. You have to wait until that green base of it like rots off to get the nut form in there. Okay. We've got our beautiful things. Now, just to kind of make sure we know, I do this mainly for my kids to see it. I'm just going to put a nut on top of all the ones so that because otherwise, you know what they'll do is they'll grab a nut one and then they take a bite and they're like, oh, nuts. And these are more for the adults, my parents. We love the ones. Actually, Teddy, he loves nuts in his, so he doesn't mind those so much. But sprinkle a couple on top so you know for those. And also for like, if I send them to the kids to school, I don't send a nut muffin to a kid who can't have nuts at school. You don't want to be the one. I did that once too, and Evie came home and she was like, you could have killed someone. I was like, I didn't mean to. Here we go. Or she once thought it one day, and I said, it was sun butter. It wasn't peanut butter. She goes, oh, I didn't eat anything for lunch. It was a sun butter sandwich. $3.50 for 20 minutes. There we go. And then they should be nice and perfect. We'll check them then. But while we're waiting for those to bake up, let's get working on our soup. Okay, before we get our meatballs going, I want to get my onion sautéing to kind of make the base of our soup on here. And then we'll get our vegetables, but then we'll work on our little kind of Italian sausage meatballs. And you could also just do like Italian sausage and saute it up in the pan. But I want to make it a little bit more jazzy, a little bit more bougie today. So we're going to do a meatball with it on there. But let's get our soup, our onions diced up. We'll give them a quick saute and let them caramelize up so they can add some nice flavor to our stock base for it.
Linda sent you.
Thank you, Linda. We appreciate that. Let's get this. And then I bought this Fennel bulb last week, and I'm like sitting here and I was deciding what I was going to do. I remember the first time, and this is like 25 years ago. I remember the first time I cooked with a Fennel bulb. It was a recipe in Williamson, Sonoma. And it was a fish and fennel bouillabaisse, like a soup. And I made that dish with it. And I was thinking about making that again, but I was like, it's been 25 years. I can't quite remember that recipe exactly. And I was trying to search for it. I'm like, I'm sure Williamson, Sonoma has it published somewhere. I could find it. I couldn't find it. But that was the first time I ever used it. But we're going to use it today. If you've never worked with fennel, the best way to describe it, it has kind of a licorice flavor to it. It's a very aromatic one. So it has very mild notes to it, which I find is very unique and lovely, but it has the look and texture of celery, but with like a licorice flavor to it, essentially like how fennel seed tastes. Okay, we've got that sauteing here. We'll get that going. And while that's sitting there, let me grab my little soup spoon rest. We will get our meatballs going. I'm only going to do 1 pound of meatballs. We're just going to use Italian sausage. So these are straight up Italian sausage meatball. Let me grab a little baking sheet to work with them on. So we're going to start with 1 piece of bread to make our penne. And we're going to soak it in about a tablespoon or so of cream. You're going to want to use a nice soft piece of bread, nothing with too firm of a crust, or you're going to have like crusty chunks in your meatball. But just enough cream to make your bread soggy, but you don't need it to be dripping and drenched. There we go. Turn it down just a smidge now that it's warmed up. And then we're going to add in 1 egg. And so basically when I'm making my panade, which is going to be my binder, I like to use per pound of meat, 1 egg and 1 slice of bread. So we're going to add in our egg. Give my hands a quick rinse. And then let's season it up. Because Italian sausage already has a pretty good flavor, we don't need a whole lot of spices, but I'm going to add a little bit more just because we're making the panade for it. We're going to add a little bit more Italian seasoning so it really pops in our soup, so about a teaspoon. We're going to add a little bit of onion powder, about a teaspoon. Just a teeny bit of garlic salt, about a half a teaspoon, because again, Italian sausage is already salty. And then a little bit of black pepper, about a half a teaspoon. And then we'll mix this up into our paste, and then we'll be ready to dump in our Italian sausage. So we're going to kind of squeeze this through my fingers to make a nice kind of egg, cream, and bread paste. And this is going to be the binder for my meatball.
You have a question. Why do you prefer garlic salt over garlic powder?
Because I find that garlic powder has a gritty texture to it. And so using like the combination of garlic powder and salt gives me a different texture versus garlic salt. And so I use garlic salt in place of garlic powder in there because it's, again, smoother one because it's essentially garlic juice and salt mixed together versus ground up garlic. And then most of the time I use fresh garlic in place of that. So it's like an addition on top of it. It's like even more garlic because everyone loves garlic. And so that's kind of why it's a texture thing, especially when I'm using it in condiments and sauces and stuff like that, where I don't want that gritty texture. Okay. Make sure you've got your paste on any of those crust chunks kind of broken up. And now I'm going to add in my Italian sausage here. So we're adding a whole pound. And then we're going to mix that panade through our Italian sausage. And you want to just kind of squeeze it through your fingers until you have it completely worked through and mixed up. And that's going to be our binder to hold together. It's going to make our meatballs nice and tender. And I really like using this instead of breadcrumbs. It's just my favorite way to make a meatball. There we go. So now that we've kind of got these, I'm gonna give my onions, whoop, my hands grabbed the wrong one. Let me give this a quick stir. There we go. And now we can sort of roll out our meatballs so that these can bake up in the oven right underneath our muffins. And I'm going to do them slightly smaller so they'll bake up quickly, but because they're also going in a soup, so I don't need them quite as big as a, I will say like spaghetti and meatballs size. You know, you want to be able to eat them with a spoon versus having to grab a knife and fork out to eat your soup. Although, if you're like my husband who eats his soup with a fork anyways, I guess that's not a problem. There we go. So just little small bits. If you want to have a really smooth meatball, just rub your hand in a little bit of oil. And then that will give you, instead of like a kind of a rougher texture, it will make it nice and smooth. I sometimes do that with, chicken or turkey, lamb. When your meat is softer, like this has a pork, so it's a little bit softer. you get more of those less smooth meatballs, but this is going in there, so it doesn't matter so much. Let's get these. And then we'll have them bake up because they're so little. These are only going to bake up, probably need about 5 or so minutes in the oven to bake up at kind of 350. And the trick is not to overbake your meatballs and dry them out. The nice thing about this is they are going in a soup, so that keeps them tender and moist as well.
And you have a question. Do you know what you're cooking yet for dinner?
I do actually have a really good idea of what I'm cooking for dinner tonight. I'm going to be making roast chicken, 2 of them, because I'm going to turn this down just a little bit, because I'm going to be making up some more stock, because I have a couple recipes that the stock I made last week was so good. So I'm going to bake up sourdough, probably make some mashed potatoes and gravy, and then overnight I'm going to make a chicken stock for it. So actually have a plan tonight. And I got to fit it between my, soccer practice, kind of, delivering my girls off to their practices. But yeah, got a plan together. That does not happen often. But I bought 2. Chicken was on, like, whole chickens were on sale, and whenever that is, I was like, perfect. And I was like, oh, if I do that, then I know what I'm making for lunch tomorrow. So that's it's a nice little plan. Let's get these guys out here, and then give my hands a quick rinse. We'll pop these up from the oven, and then we can prep up the rest of our vegetables to go into our base of our soup for it. As always. And I will say, you can always make your meatballs a little bit bigger, but smaller, I think, works well for, soups. Now, I'm not going as crazy as, Italian wedding soup. They make the really micro mini meatballs. And I will say, sometimes I am the lazy chef that goes a little bit smaller, or a little bit bigger, so I don't have to do as many repetitions for it. It's kind of like growing up, my grandmother, my momo, used to always tell me, well, this is the size that Swedish meatballs are supposed to be. But that's too much work. So we make them about twice the size of what they're supposed to be. And then you have to do half the work. And I was like, I like that method. Okay, let's get this last one rolled up. Then I'll give my hands a quick rinse. And we get them in the oven. Unfortunately, meatballs are a messy business. There's no way to do it without getting your hands dirty. So we'll get scrubbed up. And I'll give my onions. They're lovely and caramelized, so they're perfect. Be ready for our next base. Beautiful. Okay, let's go get these in the oven. We can take a quick peek at our muffins as they are baking. We're going to just slide these right underneath them. They don't need that top direct heat like our baked goods do. And then we'll just do a quick peek because we'll let it get to go. But you can see them baking up nicely here. Perfect. Okay. We're going to peel our onions, or not our onions, we're going to peel our carrots, get our celery, our fennel, our potatoes diced up, kind of make the rest of our mirepoix, and get the rest of our soup going here. So it's a really simple but delicious soup, and just kind of a basic one. We're kind of elevating it with, the Italian meatballs on there, but just kind of lighter flavors. We're going to use the chicken stock or, bouillon as our base broth flavor with some fresh thyme and some oregano. Get a lighter base. Let's get our carrots peeled up. And I know I was like sitting here and I'm like, oh, I was making the sourdough and I'm like, I had to bake up some sourdough because this would have been perfect for a grilled cheese, but I didn't have any bread. left over. So I needed to get there, but I've got 3 loaves proofing in the fridge, 2 traditional loaves, because that's just, I love mix-ins, but traditional is just my favorite sourdough. Sometimes just the classic is the best. And then I have a black pepper, rosemary, and garlic, because it's one of my also favorites that we'll be baking up. Okay, let's get these guys diced up, and we'll add them in, and then we'll get celery, our fennel, and then our potatoes in for it. And then we also have some cannellini beans for it. And then our base. We'll make our broth and let it simmer. But the nice part about this soup is you actually want to give these vegetables a nice, good saute, because it's going to bring out their flavors for it before you don't want to just dump them all in the pot with water, because you're not going to get the richness of a nice saute on them. Brings out the caramelization.
You have a question? Where do you buy your muffin cups?
My muffin cups, I actually believe I got those on Amazon. The little liner things, you can get like a big 200 pack on Amazon. I'll have to add them to my little Amazon storefront, because I pretty much get everything on. Like if they're just a random, like, things like that, Amazon. It's just very, very convenient, because otherwise you're just driving around town everywhere trying to find stuff. And when you've got 5 kids, who has the time for that? You're already running around to like 7 different fields or basketball courts. Or if you're like me, show up at the wrong field. Oh, so many times I've done that. I've driven and I'm like, oh, there, and I've driven to the wrong fields, and it was at the other ones. And then it's like, good thing they tell you to get to the fields like an hour beforehand, because I'm guessing this must happen to a lot of parents. And then it's a mad dash to go across town, and everybody's like, why didn't you check? And I'm like, I did check, but apparently I didn't check.
I don't think it's that.
It is, I swear it is. Or I'll do the wrong game time. A lot to get. There's a lot to keep straight in our head. And I swear, sometimes they just change things, and they don't send out a message. It's just changed. They like to keep us on our toes. Get these guys diced up, and then we'll give them a nice little stir, mix around. Then we'll get our celery and then our fennel, because the fennel really is the star of this show. Give a good stir. Kind of mix those carrots in. I'm going to turn my pan up now to about a 4. Nice kind of medium heat now that we've added some more veggies in here. Let's get our carrot or our celery. Again, I'm going to slice down the middle because I like smaller veggies for it. Now, I will keep my fennel a little bit larger, because my fennel, again, is more of the kind of the star of the show here. So I like it to be a little bit more present versus my aromatic vegetables like my carrots, onions, and celery. Here we go. Get these guys diced up. And we'll get those in here and sauteing up. And it's important, again, you want to really make sure your vegetables get a nice saute on them before you add in your liquid. It's going to start the cooking process, but it's also going to bring out their natural sweetness, this nice richness that you can't get by just dumping them into a broth.
Can you go over what fennel is?
Fennel is a vegetable kind of right here. This is what it looks like. It has kind of a solid, it has a mild licorice flavor, and it's just really, really wonderful. It also goes by like anise for it, but it's just really, really lovely. I find that it's very aromatic. It's not super strong. The fennel seed is a lot of times you get like that herb or spice is much stronger than the bulb. And when you cut it up, it's going to look a lot like celery in there, but it has it smells like licorice. It has that nice just scent to it. You know, will look kind of like an onion too, but lovely. It's just a more of an interesting way. It's gonna have a nice crunch to it. That's why it's really works really well in a soup because it stews up nicely. It's also great with roasted veggies, like a root vegetable. It pairs really well with sweet potatoes, carrots, you know, with like a balsamic honey glaze, just works well. We're going to also keep a little bit of these guys because they also have that nice little mild flavor to it. And I'm keeping the little fennel bits just a little bit longer. A little itch in the neck. Here we go. Beautiful. But you see how here's like the whole inside, almost like an onion, like is shooting out there. But we'll kind of cut it down and then a little bit. So it's just a little bit easier to eat. I want you to be able to scoop it up with a spoon, but not, but still notice that it's different from the celery in there. So you can really enjoy it and know the difference. Now, the strongest kind of flavor will be towards the bottom and a little bit more mild up towards the top. Yeah. And I won't use right in here this kind of rock hard bit in the middle, just like you would in the middle of a celery. I'm not going to use that. Let's get that out on there when I can find it. There we go. It's just its texture is not, it's a firmer one, so it's just not as nice in texture. The flavor's there's nothing wrong with it. It's just, it's a little bit more, you know, bitter and firm. And then I'm going to use these for the most part. These get a little bit more fibrous up toward the top, but I do love the little prongs on here. Let's go check out our muffins and see how they are. And then I'm going to give this a quick stir. Beautiful. We'll give them a little tap and see if they're ready on there. Let me grab my little. I think they need a little bit more on there. I bet you when I opened it up, I just dropped that heat down. So I'm going to give them a rotation to the other side. And I'm going to say, you know what, about 2 more minutes, they should be done. But I'm going to take these out. Let's see. You know what? We're going to do those 2 more minutes. The outside ones are done too. So both of them, 2 more minutes. Every time you open up your oven, you drop the temperature down for it. But always give a little bit of a tap, your little love tap on there, because you never know. I'm baking up in my liners, which blocks a little bit of that direct heat. So sometimes they can take a little bit longer to bake and cook. So you want to just make sure you have them cooked all the way. Okay. I've got my fennel bulb here, really chopped up. And there I've got bigger pieces, but again, not too big that you can't really eat it up in our soup. And then we're going to get that nice and sautéing here. There we go. Beautiful. Wonderful. We'll toss it in here. And the flavor, it's actually going to add this really mild fennel note to the broth, which is just going to make it wonderful. Okay, while those are sauteing, I'll get our potatoes chopped up, but we'll add our potatoes in. These don't need to be sauteed, but we'll get them prepped. But it adds just a little bit of you know, another vegetable, a little bit more base to this soup. I grabbed 3, but I think I'm only going to use 2. You're going to want to use a heartier potato, not a russet on here, because you want it to kind of hold itself together versus, you know, russet, which will kind of disintegrate in a soup. So red potato, a baby Dutch, Yukon Gold, those all work well with them. They're a little bit more waxy, so they keep their shape a little bit better.
For people that don't know, how strong is the licorice flavor?
It is not super strong, but if you have an aversion to licorice, you will not like it. You know it's there, but it's not like you're eating a licorice jelly bean, or you know what I mean? It's definitely there. But it's a very aromatic light note to it. So I will say it's not super strong, but if you don't like licorice, you will not like it at all. Although, you know, it's one of those things where as a kid, I did not like licorice. And now I do not like licorice candy, but I love fennel. So I think you just kind of get there. Nice, perfect. They're nice and ready. Beautiful. That extra minute was perfect. And look at those gorgeous banana muffins. You want to make sure they rise. You can see my little finger tap on the one. Beautiful. Okay. We've got our ones with our walnuts in it, and these again are our spiced banana muffins with cinnamon, cloves, allspice, nutmeg in there, and then our walnuts and have them, and then made with our sourdough discard. So they've got a lot of great flavor in it. Okay, and then we've got our meatballs out here. These are our mini Italian sausage meatballs made with Italian sausage and a panade with bread, egg, and our cream and spiced up. We're going to add in our broth here. So I'm going to use water, and then we'll add in some chicken bouillon. We're going to start with around a whole cup first, and then I'm just going to move some of those base around.
Why do you always do this part in stages?
Because I always like to make sure I have a little bit to scrape off any bits on the bottom. And it allows you to kind of heat up the base of your broth little by little instead of kind of shocking it all at one time. And especially if you're doing soups that you want to be thicker, like a bisque type thing, you don't want to add so much in and then realize you added too much liquid. And so I like to go little by little just to make sure that I have kind of the right amount in here. So we're going to add that in, mix it up nicely. Kind of.
Judy sent you a gift, a bunch of birds.
Thank you. I'll pop this. And now again, the aromatic note to the fennel will add a nice great spice to it. And then I'm going to add in some fresh thyme. I've got some fresh herbs over there that will add in a nice lovely note. And so we've got those in. Get our base pulled up here, and then let me give a nice little stir around, kind of mix it up, and then we're going to add a nice big scoop of chicken bouillon for this. You could also use vegetable bouillon, but I find chicken is a little bit more lighter in flavor, which works a little bit better with the fennel, because fennel, it's a very light flavor and you don't want to mask it. Assuming it opens for me. Okay, one more time. And we're going to give this to the cameraman, and you're guys going to look at me, and he's going to pretend. See, it's really tough. He's struggling over there. So much of a struggle. He can't get it either. Okay, he got it. Simple as that. See, this is why, he's good for something. We're going to put in a nice big scoop. Should really make these a lot easier to open. Nice big scoop. I need about 4 teaspoons because it's about a teaspoon per cup of that. And this is going to add the saltiness to it. Add it in here.
Oh, Linda sent you a gift.
Well, thank you, Linda. We appreciate that. And then just mix it in until it's nice and dissolved. Beautiful. And we'll add our meatballs in, but we're going to add them in towards the very end so that we don't mix them up. But I think I've been told they need it to rest and cool off right over here, awfully close to the cameraman's reach. I don't know why. They're still hot though. Okay, let me get this last little bit of our potato kind of cut up here. I'm gonna get this in here. Kind of, let's see how many. You know what? I think I might be good with even one because I don't want it to be over potato-fied. You know what? I think one potato is good. Now we have some cannellini beans in here, but before we do that, because beans I like to add towards the end because they're already kind of cooked, we're gonna get some thyme here. Let me grab this and put it in a bowl.
Yeah, what's the difference between chicken stock and water and bouillon?
So chicken stock is, so essentially if you have like water and bouillon, it's like a stock that's kind of been powderized and then put in a form for it versus stock that's in a liquid form in the box. Now you can make it your own, which is even better and great. I'm actually going to be making some chicken stock tonight with my leftover chicken carcasses for it. But you have the powder form. I like better than bouillon because it just dissolves a little bit easier on there versus the powder and the cube ones. But it's essentially like the same thing on like the box kind. One you have to store, it's a little bigger to store, but it's already pre-mixed. Let's get some fresh thyme here. I had some good herbs at the store. You know, I always find this, so you can buy fresh herbs and they're typically like $3.99, $4.99, and you get like the small little bundle. But my grocery store also sells fresh herbs for like $4.99. And the fresh herbs, $4.99, I'm like, I get way more. And if I can just, you know, remember to water them frequently, they will keep bearing me fresh herbs. We'll see. I have this plan, and we'll see if I can convince my mom. She has these really cool vegetable bowls that she doesn't use, and I really want to use them as flower pots. So I'm going to see if she'll let me use them as flower pots for my herbs. We'll see. If you see them in there, we'll know that I've convinced her. Right now, they're just sitting on a shelf in her house. So, but I think they'll be nice, kind of a cute way to use things. Or I remember them. They're I believe the artist's name was like Patricia Garrett, but she was like known for making like realistic like pottery that looked like vegetables. She had like growing up, I just remember my mom had cabbage plates, and then she had like this big pot that was, she would put her chili in on there, and it was just, she has like an eggplant bowl and a red onion and a pepper one. And I was like, oh, those would be really cute for my little herbs. Okay, I'm getting the leaves off of it. Now, thyme is one that you could, for the most part, mince up and keep some of those things, but I'm just going to take it off. You could use dried thyme for this. I would use about a teaspoon of dried thyme in the soup. I'm going to use fresh thyme, so I can use a little bit more, closer to a tablespoon of it. If you're going to use dried thyme, I would add it in when you are sauteing the vegetables. Fresh thyme, you can add in once you've got the liquid in there. It kind of it will go into the broth a little bit better, and it's nice there. So let's get these guys, all these little leaves off. Unfortunately, getting the leaves, de-leafing the spices is just not an easy task. There's no quick way to do it. Let's get these guys off, and then we'll give it a quick mince, and we can get it in there as our soup is coming to a nice little boil. The nice thing about when the process of sauteing up the vegetables is it starts the cooking process on it, so there should be getting nice and tender. And we'll give this a nice and lovely mince. Are the meatballs delicious? Cameraman approves of them, which is always a good note. Okay, so we've got our fresh thyme. I'm going to add that in here. And then we're also going to add in a bay leaf. Bring in a little bit of our flavor. This one. There we go. Let it stew. Mix that around. Beautiful. And then I'm going to get a spoon and I'm going to taste to see where our notes are at. So good. Delicious. The fennel is just wonderful. Okay, let's get our beans rinsed. We'll be about ready to add those in. Now, with beans, don't ever just dump a can in there. That starchy, beany water is not, it will just ruin your broth. So make sure you rinse them because you don't want it to dilute it and add a different flavor to it. There's my can opener. Get this guy going. And then we'll give them a quick rinse. I'm going to use a white bean. I'm using cannellini, but you could also use a Great Northern bean. Those both work well for this. I feel like the white beans, they visually work better for this soup, but they're also they're more mild in flavor as well. Okay. Give a nice little rinse here. And we're going to add these to it. We'll give them a good stir. Let me grab my little spoon. And we can mix these guys around. We'll let that simmer in. And then in a few minutes, we will mix together our meatballs in here. Okay. While we're waiting for that to come to a nice, lovely simmer, I've got to feed up Jacques because he's going down to his low base and he needs to be fed so that I can make some more sourdough because I have it cold. I've got some loaves proofing in here. If we want to have more delicious recipes, we've got to make sure we feed them up. The other day I was like, I need to feed them up. And the next day I forgot. And I had like such a small amount on here. So when I'm feeding here, I used to get very precise and do like 10 spoons and 10 spoons. And then I realized I'm like, I got a little bit, my counting method is a little, more things. I kind of visually, I will say this is why it's like really important to get a jar that has measurements on it, because then you can kind of take that base around. So they each have about a cup of starter in them. And I add essentially a cup of flour. Make sure your flour, if you're new to sourdough and stuff like that, make sure it's unbleached, because if you're using bleached flour, you're not going to get as much of a pop in there, because that bleaching kills the natural yeast, which gives you a nice rise on it. So I'm going to use about a cup in each one of unbleached flour. It does not need to be bread flour, so don't waste your good bread flour on it. And then I use about a cup of water, a little less in there, because you kind of mix it to this consistency, but it's about equal parts water, equal parts flour. So I'm going to put 2 cups in here. That way I can put a little in each one. We'll mix it up, and then our soup should be just about ready. Put a little in here. We'll mix it up, and then I'll add a little bit more at the end. Now, the trick is if you're done and you've mixed it up and your starter has a lot and it's to the top, put some in the jar or it'll pop over. I always find, this right here is Jacques and this is Gus Gus. So if you've seen Cinderella, they're named after the fat. Jacques or Gus Gus is named after the fat mouse, and this is the tall, skinny mouse, his little partner in crime there. And I always have our little if you overfill them, so Jacques often gets added to Gus Gus. That way, I don't have too much of a spillover. There we go. And we'll get these guys mixed up. But let's give our soup a quick stir here, because you can see we've got a lovely little boil down. I'm going to bring it down, which means we're just about ready. Beautiful. Look at that. Okay. let's add in our meatballs so they have a chance to simmer in now. So these are Italian sausage meatballs. Funny how so many have disappeared. I'm just going to slide them up right underneath here with my spatula. And these, again, are just made with Italian sausage. And a lovely panade using bread, egg, and I was going to put that in the soup. You didn't need to eat it. He's making sure he gets his fair share. There we go. Beautiful. And see, nice, perfect little ones. Just make it perfect for a soup. They fit nicely on your spoon. Dunk them in. Look at that. Lovely in every bite. Okay. Let me finish mixing up our Jacques over there, and then we'll be ready to serve up here. Okay, so here is kind of my consistency that I like to have. So this Gus Gus, nice kind of slightly thicker on here. Now we're going to take Jacques and dump him in. And as you can see, he's very tall into it. But I have found I do a lot of baking with sourdough, and I like to have 2 jars and a lot going because, you know, sometimes I never know. I'll get like a text or a call from my mom, like, oh, do you think you can make me a loaf or 2? I want to give one to a friend, or else somebody will ask, and I'm like, always, you know, I'm always willing to, you know, bake up a loaf for a friend or whenever. And then we're a big family, so I like to have it. And then we use a lot in, you know, discard for recipes, like, you know, my naan or my waffles use a lot.
And where can they find your recipes?
So our recipes, we have all of our videos located on the link on our page, so you can always watch our videos and create it. I do have like a tutorial on how you can make your own starter, as well as your very first loaf of sourdough bread, which I really highly recommend you start that journey because it is so much fun on there. And there's like all the videos for it. And we do have recipe cards for our members, and then we'll be coming out with a cookbook soon, which will have everything on as well. Okay, because this is a big boy, we're going to put a little bit in here. Jack is such a good friend. He always shares with Gus Gus. There we go. And it's mandatory that you name your sourdoughs. Very important. There we go. Okay. Now that our soup is simmered and the vegetables are nice and tender, let's serve up. I'm going to grab a ladle. We've got our beautiful muffins. And I grabbed some Parmesan cheese because it actually is just wonderful with this soup. You know what? Spring has sprung. I'm ready for my green plates. And let me grab my grater here. Okay, slide this guy up here. For lunch today, we have a lovely Italian fennel soup made with carrots, onions, fennel, potatoes, and a rich broth made with chicken stock and fresh thyme. And then we have our Italian meatballs in it, made with little itty Italian sausage, and they're nice and tiny. Look at that, how cute they are. And then we're gonna grate them over with some Parmesan cheese, just to add a great bit of flavor. But that fresh fennel bulb is going to add this lovely aromatic note of fennel, which is a very mild licorice flavor to it. Which is just so lovely. And then we're going to serve it with our sourdough banana spice muffins with walnuts in it, which are so delicious. They've got cinnamon, cloves, allspice, and nutmeg in them. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just go to our page and search for what we made. So our Italian fennel soup with our banana muffins, and you can always watch and cook along with me again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets in it. We've got our, knives, cutting boards, Dutch ovens, all the different things we use in the kitchen we have in there for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget